Good to see everyone back this evening. Glad that you could come our way, especially our visitors. And, Jack, you said a while back that that you were mad at me because you had to follow up following Stan Dean. And I got to follow you tonight. So I think you paid me back. That was a great lesson this morning, by the way.
I did mean to mention Lanny too in my prayer.
Right. We got a lot that are undergoing a lot of situations right now. I want to discuss with you this evening, just for a few minutes, something that came across my desk, sometime about midweek. A good friend of mine by the name of Steve Higginbotham, he is the minister at the Carnes congregation, sends out what's called a mercy mail. And basically, if you look at what it is, it's the way it's written, it's basically talking about something sent out through email, of which that's the way I received this. And I looked at it and I read this and I thought, wow, there's a lesson behind this. And it caused me to sit down and to really rethink some ideas that I've had and some thoughts that I think can help us as a congregation. And I entitled this similar to what I believe he had, which was Nameless Workers. You know, throughout the Bible, there are men that did things and overcame in areas that you and I don't know who they are. We don't know the names of every individual in the Bible that did something that followed up behind. Yeah, granted, I know we read of men such as Peter. We read of men such as Abraham. We read of men such as Moses and Joshua. But we don't necessarily read about the names of the individuals themselves that were behind the scenes doing the majority of the work that needed to be done. You know, isn't it interesting to think about in that fashion and to understand who we are and what we are based on that thought? And so this evening, I want us to just spend a few moments thinking about the nameless workers. Now, there's one that we're going to look at who's not so unnamed in the Bible, but it's what takes place in this that helps us to see the others that are involved. And I want to read verses 20 through 25 of Acts chapter 9. Immediately, he preached the Christ in the synagogue, that he is the Son of God. Then all who heard were amazed and said, "Is this not he who destroyed those who called on his name in Jerusalem, and has come here for that purpose, so that he might bring them bound to the chief priest?" But Saul increased all the more in strength and confronted the Jews who dwelt in Damascus, proving that this Jesus is the Christ. Now, after many days were passed, the Jews plotted to kill him. But their plot became known to Saul, and they watched the gates day and night to kill him. Then the disciples took him by night and let him down through the wall in a large basket. Wow. First of all, let's go back and let's get the background. The first individual we obviously know, and that's Paul. In this area of scriptures, Paul is one of those that you and I can look at and we can see just exactly how important he plays out. Now, obviously, we know a lot about the background of this man by the name of Paul. He is, after all, he's also Saul at one point. And this Saul is the one that they mentioned. He was breathing out threats. He was causing havoc with the Christians. He was doing all sorts of vile and wicked things, as we would think of. I mean, no, probably different than what we have in some areas of the world today and how Christians are treated. But it's still one of those things where this is the man that became a catalyst to it. You know, and on the road to this city, to Damascus, he has gone to the high priest and he has gotten letters. And he's going there for the sole purpose of bringing out Christians bound to Jerusalem, whether they were male or female, and presenting them to the high priest, of which we all know what was going to happen at that point. And on the road, he has a change of heart. Why do I say it that way? Because as we remember in Acts chapter 8, Saul's coming through, and he gets to this point, or excuse me, not to Acts chapter 8, the early parts of Acts chapter 9. We get to this point where Saul's coming through on this road, and he's blinded. Not immediately, it seems. He's able to talk to someone. But a light shines on him, and he hears this voice. And it's amazing what this voice does for this man named Saul. Saul, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get up. I want you to go on into Damascus, and I want you to wait. And someone's going to come to you, and they're going to tell you what you need to do. And so that's what he does. He goes in and he waits. And Ananias, as you know, comes to him. And then it's after Ananias that we see Saul. He wants to start talking to. Did you notice what he does here in verse 20? It says, and so he went into the synagogue. He didn't go just to somebody's house and listen. He went to the synagogue and he started talking about the Christ in the synagogue. And there were some people obviously a little unhappy because it says, wait a minute, isn't this the man that came here for the sole purpose of dragging Christians off? And yet now listen to what he's saying. And then if you look at the last part there in verse 22, he says, but Saul, in verse 22, but Saul increased all the more in strength and confronted the Jews who dwelt in Damascus, proving that this Jesus is the Christ. So here's Saul in all of this. And Saul is talking to them, and he is showing in Scripture exactly what they needed to see to understand that Jesus was who Jesus claimed he was. He is coming through and he is helping them and debating in some cases with them. And I love the way it brings it out. He confronted them. He let them know this is not right. This is who we need to be serving. This is the Christ of which the Scriptures talk about. This is the man by whom you and I need to do and be and follow. This is the Messiah. Can you imagine, just for a moment, those in the synagogue that knew Saul as a Pharisee and knew how zealous he was for the law of the Pharisees. And here he comes in and he's talking to them about something other than what the Pharisees would. How confused maybe they were at first, thinking, oh, well, hey, at first they probably were like, great, Saul's here, let's hear a great message from him. And then he tells them about the Christ. And now they're sitting there thinking, what? How is this? And so they start plotting. You see, that's what happens when people don't like something or they don't necessarily like an individual. They start plotting behind the backs of this individual. I've seen this happen so many times before. And so these individuals, they didn't like what Saul was teaching because he was teaching something other than what they expected him to teach. And so they start plotting against him. They find ways to get people on their side. And isn't that the way it starts? Hey, brother, I'm calling you because such and such hurt my feelings, and I want you to know what he did. And so we tell everybody else, but the individual that hurt our feelings, and we cause this big rift because I've got my people and you've got your people, and now we're ready for war. We're ready to go at it. Paul overhears about this plot. They're wanting to kill him. So much so that this isn't just a matter of, oh, well, if we see Saul, we're going to grab him. They were waiting at the gates of the city, watching for him. Saul didn't have a way out. It wasn't going to be long before they finally narrowed it down and figured out where he was. Saul had to do something. Which brings in the nameless workers. Look at these nameless workers. Verse 25 again. Then the disciples took him by night and let him down through the wall in a large basket. In other words, the only thing we can call these people right now are rope holders. They're holding the ropes as they lower him down in a basket from the walls of the city so that he can get out of Damascus without having any harm come to him. Now, here's the thing about it. If we look at the physical side of this, Saul could not have gotten out of Damascus without their help. Period. Physically, he could not have done it. There is no way, because these walls would have been massive. And we don't really know how far up in the wall this person where they are, how far up they had built their house for this window to be, that they're lowering him through to get him to the ground. We just don't know all of that information. But what we can understand is this isn't a small ordeal. And there's several of them that are holding the ropes. I'm always fascinated to think about these things because here I picture like 4 of them are right there near the window and they're just kind of slowly feeding the rope down as Saul's in this basket. And then you got this big husky guy in the back and he's kind of got the rope wrapped around him and he's just letting it out a little bit at a time as they... Now, I don't know if that's what really took place, but that's how I picture this event handling. But here's an even more amazing thing. Not one of these individuals is named as to who helped Saul get out of Damascus. I thought this was supposed to be one of those situations that would have been so amazing, somebody would have had a name. But they don't. Why? Because it's not important who they are. It's important in what they did. It's not important in the understanding of their names. They're not wanting credit. They're not wanting, first of all, they didn't want their name probably to get out because they'd been finding themselves on the bad inside of this. But they're not named. None of them wanted the credit. None of them cared about it. Oh, isn't it amazing that we can walk into congregations and we can get to talking to people and fairly quickly within that you can find the ones that are more humble than others. When I was a Marine and I was attending services at the Roosevelt Roads congregation there in Jacksonville, North Carolina, I guess I should say when I was an active Marine, we had this big thing take place and there was several people involved in it. And I remember Ron, who was the preacher at the time, was talking to us. And Ron was telling everybody about these great things that were going on. And he had people stand to be recognized for what they had done. And he named the jobs. He didn't name the people, he named the jobs. And I looked over and I knew there was this individual that did a lot. I mean, probably about 4 or 5 different things that was named off this individual was involved in. But not once did that individual stand. And so after services were over and we had a chance to just kind of mingle and talk and fellowship like we like to do, I went to the individual and I talked with her. And I said, I noticed that you didn't stand when the others did. And she said, it wasn't about me. She said, I didn't have to have that glory. The job needed to be done, and I did it. And I thought, wow. And I've tried to model myself as much as I can in that same idea. You know what the hard part about the preacher is? He's up front whether he wants to be or not in a lot of cases. Because people see him. Somebody once asked me, they said at a congregation where nobody wore a suit except for the preacher, I was asked, why do you wear a suit on Sunday morning? And my exact answer to them was, well, I'm wanting to put the congregation's best foot forward. And so that's what I do. It's not about bringing more attention to myself. I already got all the attention to myself just standing up there preaching. Well, let's face it, all eyes are on the preacher. Well, unless they're falling asleep because the preacher gets long-winded. But in all congregations, there's those nameless workers, those rope holders, the ones that go on doing the work because it needed to be done. And so that brings me to us. You see, as I read through this, my first thought I had was, how can this encourage our congregation? How can the thoughts of what Steve put down help me to help us to be better in what we do? And as I sat and pondered that thought, it hit me of what I can do to encourage us in being the nameless workers. You ready? The way I can encourage us is by simply letting us know that rolling up our sleeves and getting to the work that God has given for us is more important than worrying about who gets the credit. It's about who we are and what we are. It's about humbling ourselves before the Lord so that He can lift us up. It's about putting others before ourselves. It's about showing God in everything we do. Doesn't matter if we thought about it, if we came up with the idea. Those things are immaterial. What's important is making sure that the work that God has set forth continues not only in us, but in those that come after us. Because that's what's important. And here's how I can encourage you. It doesn't matter how big or how small the job is. We just need to get it done and find ways to do it. Here's how I can encourage you. I can remind you of a man by the name of Jesus Christ, in which the night in which he was betrayed, took his disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane. And as he was at the Garden of Gethsemane, he left the majority of them in a location and took 3 others a little deeper. He got a little deeper and he stopped them and he said, I want y'all to sit here and watch and pray And he goes deeper himself. And he demonstrates that there were moments in his life that he realized he really did not want to do. But he knew he had to. And he prayed, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. But if not, not my will, but yours be done. And he comes back and he looks, and the three that he had separated from the main group had fallen asleep, and he wakes them up and he says, look, y'all need to do this. Can you not stay awake? And he goes in. He's got a lot of pressure on him at this time. He's got a big burden on his back. And he does this 2 more times, praying to God about what he's about to go through. And he comes back, lo and behold, on that 3rd time, there they are, they're asleep again. He wakes them up and he says, it is time. He was ready. He didn't want to do it at first, but he knew he had to. And what did he end up doing? He took the cross so that you and I could have eternal life. Someone once asked me a long time ago, what's the best way to motivate our children? And I told this mother, as she asked that question, I told her, if the cross and Christ does not motivate your child, there's nothing I can say that's going to. You see, Jesus didn't take that cross because man made him. Jesus took that cross because of the love he has for us. And now it's time for us to take hold of those ropes and be those rope holders. So the question that you need to ask this evening, the first question you need to ask is, what can I do? The second question is, once you've asked the what can I do part, is ask, am I right? And if you need to obey the gospel this evening to get right with Jesus, this is the time to do it. No matter what the world says, no matter how it frowns upon us, Jesus is still there, and he is still offering salvation to any that will hear. And I plead with you to take hold of it. Whether you need to become a Christian or whether you need to get your life right as a Christian, take hold of Jesus' invitation. Let us help. Step out and come forward right now. All together we stand and sing this invitation song.